They were the faces of glamour, charm, and timeless allure, Hollywood's golden stars who lit up the screen and captured hearts worldwide. But behind the dazzling smiles and iconic roles lay untold stories of pain. When the AIDS epidemic swept through their world, it revealed a stark and tragic reality, claiming these beloved legends in heartbreaking ways. This is their story. Rock Hudson, the tragic end of a Hollywood heartthrob. Born Roy Harold Scherer, Jr., on November 17, 1925, in Winnetka, Illinois, Rock Hudson was destined to become one of the most recognizable faces of Hollywood's golden age. His towering 6'5" frame, chiseled good looks, and charming demeanor made him the ultimate romantic lead of the 1950s and 1960s. Starring in classics like Pillow Talk alongside Doris Day and Giant with Elizabeth Taylor, Hudson captivated audiences with his effortless charisma. Yet, behind the glitz and glamour, he harbored secrets that would only come to light after his death. In a time when Hollywood fiercely policed personal lives, Hudson's homosexuality remained hidden from the public. Living in fear of scandal, he endured a double life. On screen, he was the epitome of the dashing heterosexual hero. In reality, he faced immense pressure to conform to society norms. This dichotomy weighed heavily on him, but it was a later battle that would become the most harrowing chapter of his life. In the early 1980s, Hudson began experiencing symptoms of what was then a mysterious and deadly illness. He was diagnosed with HIV in 1984, at a time when the disease was poorly understood and highly stigmatized. While it is believed he contracted HIV through unprotected sexual contact, the exact circumstances remain private. For Hudson, the diagnosis was not just a death sentence, it was a potential public scandal. By the time Hudson made his final public appearance in 1985, his gaunt and frail appearance stunned fans and the media. Speculation grew, but Hudson initially kept his diagnosis secret. It wasn't until July of that year that his publicist confirmed he had AIDS, making him the first major Hollywood star to publicly acknowledge the disease. Hudson's final days were heartbreaking. He spent his last weeks at his Beverly Hills home, surrounded by close friends. He died on October 3, 1985, at the age of 59, from complications related to AIDS. His death was a cultural earthquake, shattering the silence around the epidemic. Rock Hudson's passing humanized a crisis that many had ignored, forcing the world to confront the reality of AIDS. Today, his legacy endures not just through his timeless films, but also as a symbol of courage and change in the fight against stigma and ignorance. Anthony Perkins, the man behind the mask of Norman Bates. Born April 4, 1932 in New York City, Anthony Perkins rose to fame for his chilling portrayal of Norman Bates in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, 1960. With his boyish looks and quiet intensity, Perkins became one of Hollywood's most iconic figures, forever tied to the character of the troubled motel owner. Psycho revolutionized the thriller genre, and Perkins' performance as the emotionally complex and frightening Bates became legendary. However, behind his success, Perkins carried a secret that would later change the course of his life, one that he kept hidden for many years. Perkins was an actor who was both adored by audiences and respected by critics, yet, like many actors of his era, his personal life was kept private. He was also a man of contradictions, both known for his intense on-screen personas and his reserved, sometimes reclusive nature off-screen. Perkins' homosexuality, which he had kept largely hidden, became a private struggle in an industry that had little tolerance for such truths in the 1950s and 1960s. His life took a tragic turn in the 1980s when Perkins, in his early 50s, was diagnosed with AIDS. The exact details of how he contracted the virus remain unclear, but some reports suggest it could have been linked to his relationships with men during a period when the disease was becoming more widely known and spreading through certain communities. Perkins' diagnosis came at a time when AIDS was still highly stigmatized, and many kept their diagnosis private for fear of public backlash. Perkins, however, did not go public with his battle, as he feared the consequences it could have on his career. Anthony Perkins died on September 12, 1992, at the age of 60. His death was attributed to complications from AIDS, and it shocked many, especially given how quietly he had lived with the disease. His passing was a deeply personal loss for those who knew him, as well as for fans who had grown up watching him portray some of the most memorable roles in cinema history. He spent his final days in the care of his wife, Barry Berenson, who remained by his side until the end. Sadly, just a few years after Perkins' death, Berenson herself would die in the tragic events of September 11, 2001, when American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the World Trade Center. Anthony Perkins' death from AIDS was a stark reminder of the devastating impact the disease had on the entertainment industry during the height of the crisis. Perkins, whose career spanned decades, is still remembered not only for his roles in iconic films like Psycho, but also for the quiet grace with which he dealt with personal struggles that were, tragically, so common during that time. The tragic life and death of a Hollywood star. Born November 6, 1949, in Tallahassee, Florida, Brad Davis seemed poised for a bright future in Hollywood. With his good looks, intense eyes, and raw talent, he made a name for himself in the 1970s, starring in films like Midnight Express, 1978, where his portrayal of a young American's harrowing experience in a Turkish prison earned him critical acclaim. Davis became known for his vulnerability on screen, capturing the complexity of characters facing tremendous adversity. But behind the scenes, Davis was fighting an even more personal battle that would ultimately cost him his life. In the 1980s, Davis's career was on the rise, but his personal life was marked by struggle. He faced a tumultuous relationship with drugs and alcohol, issues that likely contributed to his contraction of the HIV virus. Though the precise moment Davis contracted HIV remains unknown, it is widely believed that he became infected during a period when the disease was increasingly affecting the gay community, though Davis himself was never openly public about his sexuality or relationships. By 1985, as the AIDS epidemic became an ever-present threat, Davis started to show signs of illness. His health deteriorated rapidly, and he was diagnosed with AIDS, which at the time was still an unknown and highly stigmatized disease. Davis kept his diagnosis mostly private, but as his condition worsened, it became clear to those around him that he was in a fight for his life. The disease was not only ravaging his body, but also his spirit. Brad Davis' death on September 8, 1991, at the age of 41, came as a shock to many. His passing was attributed to complications from AIDS illnesses, and his death highlighted the devastating impact the virus was having on the entertainment industry. Davis was just beginning to explore new roles in his career when he was taken from the world too soon. He spent his final days in the company of close friends and family, his once promising life marked by both professional success and personal turmoil. What made Davis's death even more tragic was the way it underscored the stigma surrounding AIDS. In an era when the disease was feared and misunderstood, the loss of Brad Davis, a talented actor in his prime, became a painful reminder of the many lives cut short by the epidemic. His passing helped raise awareness about AIDS, though at great personal cost. Brad Davis may not have had the career longevity of some of his peers, but he left an indelible mark on film with his portrayal of complex, often tortured characters. His tragic end serves as a stark reminder of the toll that the AIDS epidemic took on both the entertainment industry and society as a whole. Born May 30, 1922 in London, England, Denholm Elliott was a versatile actor whose career spanned decades and left an undeniable mark on both British and Hollywood cinema. Known for his sharp wit and distinguished presence, Elliott's performances in films like Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981, A Room with a View, 1985, and The Whistleblower, 1996, cemented his place as one of the most respected actors of his generation. Whether playing the charming, slightly roguish character or the tender, vulnerable soul, Elliott had the uncanny ability to bring depth and warmth to every role. Despite his professional success, Elliott's personal life was marred by struggles that would go largely unnoticed by the public. In the 1980s, as the AIDS epidemic began to take hold across the globe, Elliott was diagnosed with the disease. Although details about how he contracted HIV remain private, he was known to have had several relationships throughout his life, both with women and men, and it is believed that he contracted the virus through a blood transfusion, a common means of transmission during that time when blood supplies were not properly screened. Denholm Elliott's diagnosis was a quiet tragedy. At a time when AIDS was largely misunderstood and the stigma surrounding it was intense, Elliott did not publicize his illness. Like many others suffering in silence, he continued to work in film and television, all while battling the effects of the virus. By 1992, his health began to deteriorate noticeably. Elliott's appearance had changed significantly, and rumors began to spread. He grew weaker, and the toll AIDS took on his body was evident. The world learned of Elliott's illness when he died from complications related to AIDS on October 6, 1992, at the age of 70. His death shocked both his fans and the film community. Known for his charm and humility, Elliott was beloved not just for his acting, but for his kindness and generosity off-screen. His passing marked the loss of one of Britain's finest actors, and it also served as a poignant reminder of the devastating impact AIDS was having on the entertainment industry, cutting short the lives of some of the most talented and respected individuals in Hollywood. Denholm Elliott's final days were marked by the same quiet dignity he had always shown. He passed away at his home in London, surrounded by his family. The loss was deeply felt by all who knew him. Elliott's death contributed to the growing awareness of AIDS in the arts world and added to the tragic list of performers who succumbed to the disease. In the years since, Elliott's legacy has continued to endure, not just through his memorable performances on screen, but through the recognition of his humanity and the unspoken suffering he faced in his final years. His death serves as a somber reminder of the many lives lost to AIDS, and of the strength it took for so many to live their truth in the face of immense stigma and fear. Tony Richardson, a director's legacy silenced by AIDS. Born June 5, 1928, in Shipley, West Yorkshire, England, Tony Richardson was a filmmaker who revolutionized cinema with his daring and innovative style. A pioneer of the British New Wave, Richardson won an Academy Award for Tom Jones, 1963, a film that embodied his ability to blend social commentary with vibrant storytelling. His career spanned multiple genres, from period dramas to satirical comedies, always marked by his cutting-edge direction and willingness to challenge societal norms. Richardson's films often dealt with themes of identity, class, and sexuality, subjects he grappled with personally in his own life. As a director, Richardson was a beloved figure in the industry, known for his work on The Loneliness of the Long-Distance Runner, 1962, The Charge of the Light Brigade, 1968, and A Taste of Honey, 1961. His works pushed the boundaries of film, often provoking thought and challenging the status quo. Behind his success, however, was a life marked by personal struggles, particularly with his sexuality. Richardson had been married to actress Vanessa Redgrave, with whom he had 2 children, but the marriage ended in divorce in 1967. Richardson later became known for his relationships with both men and women, not as widely publicized as some of his peers, marked a tragic loss for the film world. Richardson was a man whose vision had shaped an entire generation of filmmakers and actors, yet his own story was overshadowed by the stigma of the disease that claimed his life. In the years following his death, the legacy of Tony Richardson's work remained strong, celebrated for its boldness and its ability to speak to both the personal and the political. His passing served as a stark reminder of the many lives that AIDS cut short during its devastating early years. Richardson, who had once been at the forefront of revolutionizing cinema, was yet another brilliant talent taken by the epidemic. His final years overshadowed by the same cultural forces he had spent his career challenging. His death underscored the ongoing fight for awareness and acceptance in the face of an epidemic that affected millions, including some of the brightest minds in entertainment.